Hello everyone. I hope that everyone is fine. Today we are starting the first topic of our IGCSE physics curriculum. The first topic in our IGCSE syllabus is physical quantities and measurement techniques. So we'll go to our syllabus, the IGCSE syllabus for 2023 till 2025, and we'll see that what are the learning objectives that we need to learn here. So if you talk about the core objective, the first one is describe the use of rulers and measurement cylinders to find the length or the volume. Second one is describe how to measure the variety of time intervals using clocks and digital timers. Number third is determine an average value for the small distance and for short interval of time by measuring the multiple including the period of oscillation of the pendulum. So we are starting by describing the physical quantities first. So what are physical quantities? So physical quantities are those quantities that are measurable. Okay, so we'll start with the definition that physical quantities are those quantities that are measurable. Okay, so what are those quantities that are measurable? Now, if we look at the examples all around us, there are many quantities in our daily life that are measurable. For example, if we go to a shop to buy something, let's suppose you are going to a fruit market and you want to buy 1 kilogram of apple, then the mass of the apples are a measurable quantities, which means that you can measure the mass either 1 kilogram, 2 kilogram, 3 kilogram. So mass is one of the physical quantity. Similarly, if we talk about the time, time is a measurable quantity. We can measure the time by using a stopwatch. The length or a distance is also another measurable quantity. Speed of the object with which it is moving, it's a measurable quantity. The acceleration, the force, pressure, area, volume, all of these quantities are the measurable quantities, which mean that we can measure them. They will have some value, they will have some magnitude. Okay, so all such values or the quantities are known as the physical quantities. Now in our syllabus we have to discuss the length, time, and volume. So first talk about these quantities. And the instruments which we can use to measure these quantities. So we can say the instruments or the devices that we can use to measure these type of quantities. First talking about the length. So what could be the instruments that we can use to measure the length of the object? We can use a meter rule. We can use a measuring tape. We can use a vernier caliper or a micrometer screw gauge. Now, what is the difference between all of these instruments? The difference is very simple. All of these quantities can measure the length, but they have a different accuracy, which means that some of these instruments will be more accurate and some of these instruments will be less accurate. For example, if I talk about the meter rule, so meter rule can measure the length up till 1 millimeter. And similarly, the measuring tape can also measure the length till 1 millimeter. So it cannot measure the length to an accuracy below 1 millimeter. Okay. If we talk about the vernier caliper have more accuracy than a meter rule. It can measure the length accurately till zero point 0.1 millimeter. And talking about the micrometer screw gauge, it has an accuracy of 0.01 millimeter. And similarly, if you want to convert it in centimeters, we know that 0.01 millimeter will be equivalent to 0.001 centimeter, and 0.1 millimeter is equivalent to 0.01 centimeter, or 1 millimeter is equivalent to zero point 0.1 centimeter. So out of these instruments, we can see that the micrometer screw gauge is the most accurate one, and then comes the vernier caliper, and then comes the meter rule or measuring tape. Now moving on with the other quantities. The other quantities that we should know, the most important of them is the volume. Now talking about the volume, the instrument that we usually use to measure the volume of the object is a measuring cylinder. Or we can call it a graduate cylinder. Now how does it look like? It look like this. You must have seen this in your school labs, either in chemistry lab or in physics lab. You have some marks here which give you the value of the volume in milliliter or centimeter cube. The milliliter is equivalent to centimeter cube. So this means that we can use either of the unit to measure the volume, let's suppose, of the liquid. Either we can measure it in the unit milliliter or in centimeter cube, although the standard international unit for measuring the volume is meter cube. But of course, if we have to measure the small quantity of the volume of a liquid, then in that case we must use a smaller unit, that is a milliliter or a centimeter cube. Now volume, as you know, it is the space occupied by anything. Okay, the space occupied by anything means that it could be any type of a matter. So we can measure the volume of the solid or a liquid or a gas. Now how we are using the measuring cylinder to measure the volume of each of them? Now measuring cylinder is usually used to measure the volume of the liquids. How? Let's suppose if I have some amount of liquid, let's suppose a glass of water, Now I want to see that how much amount or the volume of the water I have. So I can just pour my glass of the liquid, the water, into this measuring cylinder, and the reading, the marks, will give me the correct measurement of the volume of the liquid. So here we were talking about the volume, that the volume can be measured in a by using the instrument that is known as a measuring cylinder or a graduate cylinder. So volume, what is volume? Volume is the space occupied by any matter, for example solid, liquid or gas. If we have to see that how much amount of the space is occupied by some solid in your room, okay, so that would be the volume of that solid. Similarly, if you want to see that how much amount of the space is occupied in a cylinder or in a balloon, so that will be a volume of that gas. And similarly, if we want to see the how much amount of the space is occupied by liquid in maybe a bottle or in a tub or in a glass, so the space occupied by the liquid in a glass, in a tub or in a bottle will be the volume of that water or that liquid. Now how we are going to measure it? We are going to pour our liquid into our measuring cylinder like this. Okay, so whenever we pour the liquid inside the measuring cylinder, it does not have a flat surface. The meniscus is always in a curve, and of course we have a bottom position here, and we have the upper position of the meniscus here. Now we always measure the volume of the liquid from the lower end of the meniscus, which means that we need to see the bottommost part, and the eye level should be perpendicular here with the liquid level. So if we are placing the eye level perpendicular or at the lower meniscus level, then in that case there will be no error or no parallax error. If you are placing your eye here, let's suppose, then of course it is not going to give you the correct value. It is going to create an error. So this is not the correct position. This is the correct position of placing the eye. So from here, from the lower meniscus level, you can measure the volume of the liquid. So let's suppose our volume is 7 milliliter. So we can say that it is 7 milliliter or 7 centimeter cube in this case. Now for the case of the solids, we can also use the measuring cylinder for the case of solids. How? Let us suppose if I have a solid which is in an irregular shape. This is an irregular shaped solid, and I want to measure the volume of the irregular shaped object. Now this irregular shaped object or the solid is quite different from the regular shaped objects. Now what are the regular shaped objects? The regular shaped objects are the known shapes. For example, if I have a cube like this cube is a regular shaped cube or the regular shape object. Similarly, if I have a sphere, this sphere is a regular shape. Or I have a cylinder or the cylindrical shape object which looks like this. This is also a regular shape. So for the regular shape objects, we can just use a formula because each of the shape have a different formula for measuring the volume. So we can calculate the volume of that regular shape object by using the formula. For example, if we know the dimensions, length into width into height, then we can find the volume of the cube by this formula. Or if we want to measure the volume of a sphere, then we can use the formula 4 by 3 pi r cube. And for the volume of the cylinder, the formula is pi r square h. Now r here is the radius of this circle, the outer circle, and h is basically the height or the length of the cylinder. Pi has a value of 3.14. So if we know all of these values, we can just put these values in the formula and we can do the calculations for the volume. But the problem arises when we have an irregular shape object, because for the irregular shape object we don't have a formula, we don't have a set formula to calculate the volume. Now in that case we will use the measuring cylinder. How? Let us suppose we have a measuring cylinder here like this, and we have this irregular shape object as well. What we are going to do is that we are going to fill this measuring cylinder with some liquid till certain level. For example, I'm filling the liquid till this level. So this is the level of the liquid, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 milliliter. So the initial volume of the water or the liquid inside this cylinder was 4 milliliter. And after that I will put my irregular shape object in the same cylinder with the same liquid. And what I am going to observe is that the water level is going to rise up as I am going to put my irregular shape object inside this liquid by the help of a string. So what's the new level here? The new level will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, 6, so maybe 5 milliliter. So the final volume here of the liquid is 5 milliliter. So the difference in the volume of the liquids here is, or you can say that the rise in the water level is basically the volume of that irregular shape object. So the rise of the water level is equivalent to the final volume minus initial volume. The final volume was 5 milliliter and the initial volume was 4 milliliter. So the difference in the volume is 1 milliliter, which is equivalent to 1 centimeter cube. So this difference of the volume is basically the volume of that irregular shape object. So the volume of irregular shape object will be equal to 1 centimeter cube. So this is the method that we use to find the volume of the irregular shape object.